Wow, that was impressive. It's the first time I've seen that, Mark Haw, who is the man behind the curtain that you don't see. And my name is Bill Gustin, the oldest guy in the room, here for our monthly Hump Day Hangout. Our topic is, it's usually a loose topic in terms of, we're not want to be rigid because we have plenty to talk about. For instance, we have our esteemed guest or regular participant, I should say, is Clark Lamping. I'm interested to hear about his account of responding to the fire in Maui. And we rarely get this guy on because he's a big important fella here. But we've got Chief Dan Shaw from Fairfax County, and the fellow that went to Maui is Captain Clark Lamping of the Clark County Fire Department in the Las Vegas area. And then we have Samuel Hittle from Wichita, Kansas, and newly retired Daryl Liggins. And our special guest, and I've asked him to come on because he is a chief in the area that I arguably is the lightning strike capital of the world. And we're going to get to that shortly there. That would be Walt Lewis. I want to thank our friends at Key. That's keyhose.com, namely Mark Lighthill and Dave Hibben. You can never go wrong. And look at this here. We got a Canadian. It looks like he's, hey.
Hey, Brent. How are you?
Good to see you, Brent.
Now it's an international show.
Toronto, Canada. And getting back to Walt is he is a chief with the Orlando Fire Department in Central Florida that is arguably the lightning strike capital of the world. So a word about Key Hose. I'm reading this right off the back cover of Fire Engineering, and that is the FDNY spec hose, the attack hose from Key. It's badass, okay, in terms of its durability, heat and abrasion resistance, and kink resistance, and low friction loss. Built to a stringent spec for use by some of the most relentless firefighters like us. We're relentless. The FDNY spec is designed with the knockdown, conquering prowess that conventional attack hose doesn't have. Driven by an advanced 1.88 internal diameter, this double-jacketed beast, that's what it says, beast, delivers targeted flows in excess of 175 gallons a minute. Seize the FDNY spec and experience high-performance attack line that packs more muscle. Well, that's our shout out to our friends at Key. I think we could begin with you, Chief Lewis. Let's. I'm sure everybody is familiar with our friend Brent Brooks. He's north of the border in Toronto. You're sitting in the cab of your truck.
Just on my personal fire truck, just outside the fire hall. We just finished training at the airport, actually, high rise at the airport, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, that's right. And you were concerned that you were not going to be able to make it, but you did make it. So
toed the line.
Thank goodness for that. And by the way, we stole your idea about making we call that now the Canadian hot tub for lithium-ion battery-powered cars. I think it's the way to go, Brent, and all the credit goes to you.
Thanks for the shout out.
Chief Lewis, do you have those graphics up from the Orlando area regarding the history of lightning strikes this last couple of days?
Yeah, a couple of nights ago, the night of September 11th, when we came home, it was just not an uncommon circumstance. Thunderstorms roll through the area. Everybody's got their specific weather that hits their area. If it was snow coming through, we'd all be in a massive panic and phoning friends on how to handle. But lightning's kind of one of those things you just deal with in Central Florida. You just got the tropic environment. And when the storm systems collide, they tend to generate more cloud activity. Now, a lot of the lightning that we see is cloud to cloud, which is a great benefit. But when you get 1,000 lightning strikes, some of those are coming to the ground and some of those are finding a target that stays on fire or catches fire. the other night. We didn't get to talk too much about it, Cap, but the one picture that's right next to the blue dot, if it comes up, if we can show that, there's the one picture that shows the lightning strikes local to the area. And on that, now we're going to go a little further over. You see a bunch of little dots, and it's the smallest, the one with the fewest dots in it. It came through a different email. If it didn't come through, Mark, let me know. I'll send it again. But the closest dot to where my blue dot is in the picture is my neighbor's house. So lightning was popping off all over. They're great folks. I called them up and asked them, hey, are you guys all right? Yeah, we lost power for a second there. I'm a little concerned. So never off duty like a firefighter, went next door and searched through the house and just gave them a little confidence that their house was not on fire. But they had some signs of maybe it took a lightning strike as the night went through. So there's some shingles missing and there's a little bit of damage to the roof. So I have an electrician going out there to do the work and investigate the house to make sure it's safe. But thankfully for them, it didn't catch fire. But there's plenty of other times when those circumstances turn into a house fire.
Chief, a couple questions.
Sure.
Have you ever commanded a fire operation where you had to stop an operation due to lightning?
Due to lightning, no, but to not throw ladders, yes.
Okay,
so we've had the weather that nasty where just putting the aerial boom in the air is a no-go, even ground ladders, just so you're not carrying a giant antenna.
Yeah, yeah. Or you could have wood ladders like they have. They have wood ladders in Oakland, Daryl?
Yeah, we have our engines have fiberglass ladders, but all the trucks have wood ladders. And our concern with electricity is just the amount of overhead power lines in the city. We're always contending with that.
And I look at a picture of Oakland, and it reminds me of like mill towns in like Connecticut and Massachusetts. And you have 3-deckers. It's like you've been gone from New England over to the West Coast. Where you've had, Chief Lewis, can I ask you this? Because then I've got some pictures to share myself.
Sure.
Have you experienced where you have a lightning strike where you have more than one fire in a structure, or perhaps fires in one or more, or fires in 2 or more structures?
I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty confident. We had one apartment building that I'd have done better by getting some more pictures, but I was a little busy. 3-story wood frame, lightning strike evident to the roof, and it looked like it split the path and came down and created 2 different sides of fire, and came out as an automatic fire alarm. And as it upgraded, more and more of the occupants had to get out. We had to do more overhaul, chase down burnt wood to find clean wood. And then ultimately it secured power on the building, and it turned into an assessment center even, because one of the occupancies, as we turned off the power, turns out they had a child on a ventilator in the place. So just one complication after the next, but multiple points and multiple locations of fire. So anything's possible, right?
Yeah. And because they're attic fires, we've had many an attic fire where a neighbor sees the fire. People don't even know, an attic fire, it's clear as a bell. And I think that Samuel is going to allude on using a thermal imager, and it can't always be reliable on certain attic fire situations because of the insulation. Mark, can you run our pictures from Miami-Dade? And I want to give a shout out to my dear friend Matt Livingstone. Okay. 7,500 volt primary line fell, followed the electric service into the house and to the electric meter can on the side of the attached garage. Blew the meter can out, and as you can see, the fire in this picture is spreading in the rafter bay across the garage roof and is headed towards the electrical panel, which is on the opposite wall of the garage. The next picture there, Mark. Okay, so my being an experienced fire officer, my friend Matt says, well, hey, we've got to examine your house thoroughly. And the homeowner says, well, why? Because you may have more than one fire. And, here it is. Yep. They go around the house, and here's the door to the media room. And that's the char at the door. If you go to the next picture, and man, it fried a bunch of servers and other electrical equipment. And if you can take the next picture, that is in a separate building on the property. That was a office, a separate building, back of the swimming pool. This is high-end stuff, big lot. And it completely blew out the electrical panel. So Matt, being the sharp guy that he is, went back and looked at the power pole where the wire had fallen, because he wants to see if there's any other properties, any other homes in that area that are receiving the electric service from that transformer and that utility pole. And luckily there wasn't. But if there was, he would have been knocking on people's door in the early morning hours. Next picture. That is a 1,000 gallon above ground LP tank that Matt and his company, Engine 14, couldn't see because of the arcing from the down primary line. So let's go to the next picture. Okay, what you see in the foreground, that semicircle, that's the power line. That's the power line, and that's how close it came to the 1,000 gallon LP tank. Now, had it come any closer, it would have cut through that tank like a plasma cutter, an exothermic torch for you old timers. And 14's crew, they would have been either in the cemetery or the burn center. In fact, everybody on the assignment, because it was a house fire assignment, would have been in really badly burned or killed. Next picture. That's the other end of the wire. And look how close it is to the nose of that, the tank. And I think I have one more. And is that it, Mark? If that's it, that's fine. We're good with that. We're good with that. And my thanks to Matt Livingstone for sharing that with us. That was a near miss. That was a near miss and a classic multiple fires started by lightning. Chief Dan Shaw, I know that you have a appointment to make, but you've got some things to tell us because of you were on an investigation panel. And could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so unfortunately on August 11th, 2021, Josh Laird of the Frederick County Department of Fire Rescue Services, which is about 50 miles west of Baltimore, they responded to a house fire, and Josh ultimately ended up losing his life, which was really unfortunate. And a mere couple of years earlier, a very similar fire occurred in a neighborhood with Nate Flynn, who died in Howard County Department of Fire Rescue. And both of those fires were lightning-induced CSST gas line fires, in which a lightning strike hit the propane tank outside the residence. It traveled the path of least resistance, which is obviously it's 100,000 volts of electricity trying to find somewhere to go. And that conduit, it was the perfect place for it to go. And what happens is essentially when it hits that CSST gas line, if it's not properly bonded or grounded, it causes these perforations in the line. And so you have these small pinholes, and this fugitive gas is escaping, and it's ignited. And where most all gas lines go, they all go through the basement flooring system. And in the case of Josh's fire, it was going to the fireplace. It was a very large home, going to the fireplace and going to the range. And no one was home at the time. It was in a more rural area. And so by the time that it had burned through the floor and extended upwards and was venting out of the windows on the rear wing of this house is when someone finally called 911. And that, Josh and his crew arrived pretty early on to that. But on that day, I mean, we don't have an inordinate amount of lightning we have normal weather for the eastern seaboard, but there were 63 lightning strikes within a 5-mile radius of that house as this storm came through with Josh. And that was a 120-gallon container hit, or tank had hit, and then when it ruptured the lines and burned. And so while they were in the midst of the firefight, Josh did what I know I've done probably plenty of times, and most of you on this panel have. The fire was burning from a wing into the main body of the house. He took a step into the house to see if the fire had come into the main body of the house. Took another step. When he took another step, the floor completely collapsed and he fell into the basement. And his transmissions back and forth to the crews who were trying to rescue him. He was trying to give him as much information as he could, but it was getting hot where he was. And then eventually Josh ran out of air. And the crew that came and found him in very swift order and quick order and got him out very quickly. But unfortunately, he had already succumbed to his injuries. And I would tell you, like, when we think about these fires, there are lightning strikes. I know I was raised this way, and I guess it was trying to break your confirmation bias. But when we get dispatched to fires that are lightning strikes, we inherently probably arrive and see smoke coming from the attic. And we think that's what it is. It's an attic fire. We're just confirming our bias when we get there. It's a lightning strike. It probably hit the roof. That's the highest part. There's smoke coming out of the attic. It's definitely an attic fire. And what you learn is that, majority of these fires are trying to go to the basement. That electricity is trying to go to the basement. And so we can't discount it and automatically just think because I've been to this fire before. And that's a strong thing to do as incident commanders. We have to do it as firefighters first arriving. I mean, we require a lap of all of our first two engine and first two special service before they go in for that specific reason is, figure out where the scope of your problem is and don't be a moth to the light looking up the entire time. If it has a basement, you have got to make sure there's no fire in the basement. And that's to physically make sure there's no fire in the basement. So that would be the one thing I would pull from that. And then, a lot of these fires we get to, with this fire in case with Josh, it was pretty well progressed when they got there. And when they got there, it's going pretty good. It's the stressors are up, and we know the impact of stress on human performance and what that gets you to do. And we're really focusing on getting the fire out. And if you're short-staffed, you a lot of times discount some basic fundamental things that we talk about when we probably go through promotional exercises, like checking the utilities and controlling utilities. And, a lot of personnel, and it's not a fault of theirs, but a lot of personnel were trying to fight fire, and that tank was right next to the house. And it wasn't until later that someone had identified during the course of the firefight, can someone control the utilities? This is a gas-fed fire, because they were putting water on the fire and it was not going out. So if we're going to learn anything from incidents like this, is to break that confirmation bias that every lightning strike fire is going to be in the attic, even if it looks like it is. It may originate in the basement, and you got to check on the basement. And never discount the importance of some basic fundamental skills that we would expect on these fires, like checking utilities and controlling utilities. At least then we can stop the source of what is everything that's burning this fire, and then we can focus solely on the firefight. But a lot of lessons to be learned from. Those two fires alone were the catalyst for the legislation in Maryland that was named after Josh and Nate regarding CSST gas lines. They're everywhere. They're not the devil, but they're not helping us at all, especially if they're improperly installed. And when we're in areas that we see more and more, last night we got hit with probably 2 hours plus of just nonstop lightning here in the Baltimore, Washington area. It's always something that has to be ever present in our minds, especially to honor the memory of Nate and Josh.
Okay. Dan, I know you've watched the compelling training video produced by ATF, hosted by Adam St. John, who I'm going to give a big shout out to that guy. He teaches with a passion, and I hope you're watching there, Adam, and hope to meet you someday and shake your hand. But excellent job on that. And what really grips you is the video begins with the two widows, and it'll get your attention. Dan, can you elaborate just a little bit on what CSST stands for?
Yeah, so corrugated steel, stainless steel tubing. So a lot of times you'll see in houses, newer construction, renovations, it's that yellow gas line that's running through the structure. And there's various types of it. I knew nothing of it when I was, started doing this. I think there was a couple of us who just kept using CSST and had no idea what it stands for because it sounded really good, cool to say it. But that is being used in construction all over the place. And depending on how good your contractor is, if they follow code, if it's not a homeowner just do it themselves, if they know how to properly bond and ground it, all those things lead to it. But it's just another thing. And I know, Bill, we've talked about it numerous times, and the people I have the privilege to work with will hear it ad nauseum. But it goes back to the fire always gets a vote. And then these challenges we face every single day don't get any less. And so when we do things like this, the importance of us talking and sharing experience and knowledge, and accumulating knowledge is so important because our environment changes. Our enemy changes every day.
Mark, can we post a link for that ATF training video that every firefighter should see? Like I say, it will grip you because of it beginning with the two widows. My heart goes out to them. And the other thing, Dan, is both houses were humongous.
Enormous.
Yes.
Yeah, enormous structures. I mean, the giant lumber yards. The basement where Josh's fire was burning was an unfinished basement with, lightweight wood trusses. And it was just plenty of fuel for it to burn.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you experienced a fire associated with that CSST Chief Lewis in Central Florida? You're muted there, Mark. Unmute him.
So not specifically, not that I could have stand out, but it's something that's hit our radar because of, unfortunately, that tragedy. So anytime lightning hits, you can always try to find the weakest points, and you don't know what they are until you finally find the clean wood and wherever it goes. But fortunately, the gas service to most of our houses, we have a poly line, or we have a braided line that's not the CSST, but it's emerging in the construction industry. So I would imagine it's only a matter of time.
And guys, it could be telephone. It could be cable TV. It doesn't necessarily have to be the gas line, but the gas line is really bad. You mentioned something about clean wood, and I think this is going to bring us into Sam. I've said this in just about every hangout. We're almost at the halfway point. I also want to give a shout out and our thanks to Key at keyhose.com. It has amazing kink resistance and abrasion and heat resistance. It's being dragged around our drill ground right now to the training center that I will have to leave, or I will have to leave my house. I'm at my house right now because the wireless internet at the sixth biggest fire department in the United States is crap. So I have to come here to you in my palatial bachelor pad here because the internet is more reliable. Sam, I've said this in many a hangout. The terms, they're buzzwords, trendy, green and sustainable are not always a firefighter's friend. When let's take for example cellulose insulation up in an attic. Could you comment on that in the context of the use of a thermal imaging camera?
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on the green thing. It's kind of funny. I think it shows our arrogance in the fire service to call something green when the construction industry is still arguing over 3 different terms of what green actually is. And it's kind of interesting, when you look at some of these synthetic shingles that have a 50-year warranty, 100-year lifespan, those things will not burn. You will see fire coming out of every window before that actually burns and shows itself through the attic space. But most of us don't really think of green being a plastic shingle. But nonetheless, it is because of its lifespan. So we have to keep that in mind. Then we have to keep in mind the fact that green can also constitute less structural members, which means we have less time to operate in that structure if we do have hidden fire when it is wood frame. But going to the attic specifically, Insulation is going to do exactly what insulation is supposed to, and it's going to mask and it's going to suppress. So when we have stuff like that gas line or conduit, we've had a fire before where the conduit actually traveled through to another duplex and ended up lighting off over there. So that's going to all happen underneath the insulation, and the thermal imager will not show you that through the insulation. If it does, you don't need a thermal imager because everything is going to be obvious to you. So what we advocate instead, and hopefully Mark can get the video up, what we advocate is using a flashlight. You'll see that wisp of incipient smoke. They're not going to see that light colored smoke, right? It's going to go right through it. But if you take a thermal imager or a flashlight and you just skim over the top of that insulation, that white smoke will actually provide reflection, and that light will bounce back on you. So we advocate guys go up with brooms and flashlights into the attic space.
Sam, who else had that suggestion is investigating odors of smoke when we were just is our brother Jimmy Davis, who I thought would be on today, but he's probably crawling down a smoky hallway right now in command of Engine Company 43 in the Chicago Fire Department. Again, Sam, it bears repeating. You're investigating a smell of smoke, a source of smoke. And again, I think it's important enough, it bears repeating. How does a flashlight help you detect a faint amount of smoke?
So here's what we do in the thermal imaging class for the department to drive this home. We simply take a match. Okay, so here's your desktop, right? And we take a match and we light it and we blow it out and we bring the match down below the desk, and you get that white smoke, right? Now keep in mind, this is with the lights off, and we have them use the thermal imager to see if they can see any of that smoke from like a candle being blown out or a match. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The thermal imager, of course, doesn't pick it up. Then we have them take their flashlight and skim over the top of that desktop, and they get a lot of reflection. So like I said, hopefully we can get that video put up. If not, it's something I'm willing to share we can put up later, but it shows smoldering underneath a pile of insulation. You can't see the smoke with the naked eye. You can't see the smoke or heat signature with the thermal imager, but then we take that flashlight and you get that bounce.
Brother Brent, any experience with lightning?
All I can tell you is that we have that lightning rod called the CN Tower.
Did you send that picture? Do we have that picture?
I don't know, but the CN Tower gets hit 75 times a year. And believe it or not, it has 20 foot long. They're 20 inches thick, 20 feet long, and they got 42 copper rods underneath the tower. And that's what takes that electricity strikes into the ground. And when I was researching lightning strikes on high-rise buildings, I found out Chicago, the Willis Tower, it gets hit around 250 times between 2015 and 2020. And then it's the New York City's World Trade Center. And then it's the Bank of America's building in Atlanta. And then Houston, Texas has that JP Morgan Chase. And then the fifth one would be the Key Tower in Cleveland. So high-rise buildings certainly get hit. And when you're ever on the rooftop of these high-rise buildings, you're going to notice two cables. One cable is for working at heights and working on edges. And that other cable is that lightning rod cable. So you got to know the difference between those two.
Yeah. Do we have that picture? Because it was compelling. Mark, do you have that picture?
And they say
Sorry, we
lightning
don't have it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Lightning never hits strike, but it certainly does hit more than once.
We can show them. Well, let me go to Daryl. So you don't have lightning.
Yeah.
But,
So
like I say, your overhead wires in Oakland, California are a nightmare. And they remind me of a town in Connecticut where Tom Brennan was the chief before he became the editor of Fire Engineering. after he retired from the FDNY. Then he went to this town in Connecticut, and it was an eye opener for him because as many overhead wire problems as they have in Connecticut or in the FDNY, this town in Connecticut was no joke. So
some people wonder why San Francisco is dealing with a tremendous amount of overhead wires as well, and we border them. That's why they still have a 50-foot ladder. We have a 40-foot ground ladder because we can't get our aerials in place or use them where there's a lot of overhead wires. But as we saw in Maui, that's the cause of a lot of fires too when we have these down lines. But the city of Oakland overall, lightning is an extremely rare event. You could probably go a couple years without seeing any lightning strike. It's kind of an exciting thing if a storm ever rolls through. So I almost want to say we don't have lightning, but we have a lot throughout California. There are some very dangerous lightning strikes that roll through, and it's usually dry lightning storms. And I was just looking up because a couple years ago it impacted us here in the Bay Area. We had a lightning complex fire come through, and what the Cal Fire, which is the largest fire department in California, they're broken up into 21 different units throughout California. And this unit was in Napa County, the wine country, Sonoma Napa unit. It was called the LNU fire. It was one of the largest fires in California history. And it was a lightning complex. So what it is they predict with their meteorologists that there's going to be a dry lightning storm coming through. And as we know, the West is primarily desert, and all those ground strikes are causing fires. So in this fire, it was August of 2020. It caused 250 separate fires, all pretty much in a pretty close time frame. It ended up burning over a month and a half, burning down almost 1,500 structures, 1,491 structures, and killed 6 civilians. So what those units will do is when they know these dry lightning storms are coming in, they start pre-positioning units to be in those areas for these dry lightning strikes. So we don't deal with it, day to day like the city of Orlando or something. And because of that, I have a couple questions that kind of perplex me from someone that has no experience with lightning. One is, how does it impact your ladder operations? Because we do have ever-changing things, and if something comes in, I'm sure the first lightning bolt, they would say that aerial ladder has to come down. So one is, at what point do you not feel safe with aerial operations? And then the other, as Brent was talking about with lightning rods, are private dwellings using lightning rods? I know you said your neighbor had damage to their house, and I would have just thought that might even be an ordinance or something if it's causing structural fires, and if houses are using them, are they effective? You're muted there, Chief.
There we go. All right, thanks. No, not a lot of residential lightning rod use. Structural, commercial structures, yes. So the taller structures in the Metro Orlando area, of course, they have them for the building protection value. But most of the residential structures, the high value homes, many of them do. I got a picture I shared with Mark, a house fire. That house had lightning rods and a lightning ground system, but it wasn't effective. And for that homeowner, the lightning strike to discovery of fire was about a 6-hour time lapse. And they just weren't home when the lightning struck to identify that was the cause. But as far as aerial operations, to your other question, we know when storms are coming through, we can almost time them. In the Central Florida, that's the house fire there. So to go back to this, and I'll go to aerial operations. So no, go back to the last one, Mark, for me. So units arrived around 1:30 in the morning for this house fire, which was struck around 6:30 at night for a lightning storm that came through the area. And when they do, we just kind of sit and wait. We know we're going to get something out of it. We always get the transformers that blow. We get a minor power outage. A lot of the areas now served by underground service, so less and less of it's being affected. But this resident's home is about 11,000 square feet. The peak of the roof was struck, and when they came home from dinner, he had done some work on the second floor and thought the air conditioning had gone out because of the fire going on in the attic. He had such warmth on the second floor, and it's Florida. We don't deal with without air conditioning very well, so he was going to make an appointment to have an air conditioning technician come out the very next day, and then resign himself to go to bed. Fortunately, on the first floor, and when his automatic fire alarm went off for his residence, it alerted him. He and his wife exited and saw the flames, and then from them, the security guard and the automatic fire alarm system certainly upgraded. And from the road, I called a second alarm to help make sure we control the situation. But been to several fires from that 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock at night timeline, the dominance of when we get those lightning strikes and lightning storms coming through. We have it in mind that if it's nasty and it's popping around us, that we're not going to fly the bucket. Fortunately, most of those fires are going to be 1 or 2 story houses. We can get away without having to fly it. So we just have to work around it. But we've had the few where we needed to use the bucket. It wasn't worth the risk to put the pads down on the ground. And even though the rear jacks go to the ground, they have a pad, but it's a steel pad so that it goes and transmits that energy to the ground. We don't want to take that chance. So it's unfortunate, but that's the risk we don't want to take.
Does Orlando, is every one of your ladder apparatus a platform, a tower ladder?
Yes, sir. So in the future, we'll have a Sutphen tiller, but for right now, everything's a bucket.
Okay. I think we're going to switch gears here now for a minute. Clark, you've had the dubious opportunity. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant to be the first urban search and rescue task force to arrive in Maui for this fire. And we've got about 20 minutes or so. I think we can, between that and swift water rescue, let's use the rest of the program to listen to what you have to say.
All right. Thank you for the floor. So Nevada Task Force responded to Maui with a Type 3 team, and we arrived with Washington, who was a Type 1 team. They brought about 90 personnel. We brought about 70 personnel. We were the first teams on the ground that day. We eventually were joined by California 6, Indiana, and Missouri. Once we arrived there, we worked for a couple of days. We realized the scope of the job that we had. Nevada arrived with 4 dogs. I think Washington arrived with 6 dogs. We ended up calling 35 dogs to Maui by the time it was done. That's how big the job was. The cause of the fire, what I'm telling you here, this is not any confidential. This is proven. The cause of the fire was originally it was agricultural mismanagement, where they used to have sugarcane fields up in the hills above Lahaina, 10,000 acres of sugarcane fields. They no longer have a sugarcane industry in Lahaina, so they let the sugarcane just die in the field, and it was replaced by a invasive grass species. And that grass species is just about 36 inches tall, and it's just dry grass, and it runs from the volcano all the way down to the town. So on the night of the fire, they were Hurricane Dora passed by Hawaii, and the outer bands of Dora were whipping Maui, and they had sustained 60-mile-an-hour winds with gusts up to 80 miles an hour. And just like I think it was Daryl said, they have. In addition, they have very antiquated electrical infrastructure. They built the infrastructure in 1962, and it really wasn't upgraded much. They still had transformers with PCBs in it. Everything was above ground. A lot of drops to houses and things like that. So the actual cause of the fire was winds taking down a power line, laying lines in the grass. And a lot of the power lines we found were not even insulated. They still had bare electrical lines in Lahaina. So the power line laid down in the grass started the fire, and it was pushed by 60 to 80 mile an hour winds down on the village of Lahaina. And that 80-mile-an-hour winds, that's well over 100 feet per second. So that fire came down on that town at 100 feet, over 100 feet per second, and that town stood very, very little chance. All the things people are seeing on the news, the media is showing, is the tourist part of Lahaina, which is right there on the ocean with all the shops and the Wyland galleries and the banyan tree, things like that. They're not really paying any attention to the town of Lahaina, which is on the other side of the highway. They had 1,700 homes in the town of Lahaina. And out of those 1,700 homes, it was about 95% completely destroyed when we showed up. So yeah, we arrived, and our original assignment was to use the GPS system, and we were going from property to property to identify what type of a structure, if we could identify what type of a structure was on the property, the level of damage or destruction to that property. We were looking for vehicles, the level of destruction of the vehicles, and we were releasing dogs to see if the dogs could locate any human remains. The roads, I could describe when we first showed up. It looked like the scenes, I've seen the pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Everything was burned completely to the ground. Completely to the ground. There was nothing less. Everything was gray. There was a couple burned trees standing. There was a couple burned power poles standing. But besides that, everything was burned completely to the ground. So we had to approach, we had to clear roads. We were cutting down power lines. We were cutting power poles, trees. We were pushing vehicles out of the way, dragging vehicles out of the way. And we went from property to property to set up this grid. Nevada was primarily in the residential section, where Washington, they sent Washington down to the commercial area. Yeah, that's what we did for about a week, just property by property and identifying remains. We were joined by a team that I didn't know existed. There's a team of anthropologists from Hickam Air Force Base, which is on Oahu. And this team works for the U.S. government, and the purpose of this team is to identify missing in action soldiers from World War II, Vietnam, and Korea. And this team goes throughout South Pacific, following leads and investigating, trying to identify U.S. soldiers who are still missing in action. That team joined us on Maui, and they were assisting us with the identification of the remains we were finding. There was not a lot of remains we were finding. It was that hot. We found vehicles that had glass. The windshields were melted in the vehicles, and I've never seen that before. I've done some research. That's 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit that a windshield will actually melt. And we also had all the aluminum rims and the parts of the cars melted. So on the streets, there would just be small rivers of aluminum down on the asphalt. So extremely hot, extremely fast fire. A couple days later, we had more dogs, and then they brought excavators in. And with the excavators, we were able to, some of the larger structures, some of the commercial structures, to delayer some of these structures, pull the roofs off that were too dangerous to get in. And then we allowed the dogs to go in there and hit. Once the dogs had a hit, then we would, the search team would go in, and we'd sift through the building and see if we could identify anything. Really, really tragic scenario. The Hawaiians are a beautiful, beautiful race of people, very friendly, very family oriented. And we were getting reports that there were a lot of times 3 full generations of families living in one home. You could tell, one of the things we were identifying, if you're on a property, how many ovens were on the property, because the land was so expensive that the majority of your properties had more than one family living on the lot. So we would have to identify how many ovens were on the lot, and that would kind of give us an indication of how many families were potentially living on that piece of property. So once the excavators came through, pulled some of the delayering off, and then we were able to search some of these larger structures. We got into some light commercial. And then what did we do? Oh, and then there's a lot of structures standing. We got a parking structure that was still barely standing, and the structural engineers told us not to go close to that. So once we had the excavators come in, we went and we actually knocked that structure down with the excavators. And then, of course, the dogs hit on that property. So we had to go in there and jackhammer this parking garage apart and move it out of the way, and do some searching with the dogs and sifting through the rubble.
How long were you there, Clark?
2 weeks. We were there for 2 weeks, Cap.
Jesus.
Yeah, and that was 12 hours a day, every single day. That's what we did. The dogs, we had to recycle dogs. I didn't know this. A dog can only work for 15 minutes at a time. I'm a dog expert now because I worked with dogs every single day, multiple dogs. And just a dog works for 15 minutes. If a dog gets a hit on something, they pull that dog and that handler off the property, and they send another dog and handler on. If that dog hits, they have to have 3 dogs hit before we go in and search. So once we had the 3rd dog hit, we would go in and search. And we're talking just on our knees digging with hands. That's it. That's all that was left. There was no heavy equipment. There's no shovels, anything like that. It was just hand tools at this point. Yeah, that was it was a long couple weeks. It was a long couple weeks, but we had some good people working with us. We worked with Maui Fire Department every single day. A lot of agencies, force protection agencies from all over the United States came through, and when those other teams showed up, it was we knew when we were showing up, we weren't going to find anybody. We weren't going to find anybody, but I think what we did is our team, the teams, provided hope and provided something to the people of Lahaina and the people of Maui. When we arrived at the airport, they were so happy to see us that we were there to help them, and they were so thrilled that people from all over the country were coming to help their community. And I think that's a win for the federal FEMA organization and the teams.
Clark, when you say that you knew you weren't going to find anybody, is that because of these high temperatures and high winds, or the equivalent of like cremation?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right, Daryl. There was nothing left. If it was a brick house, there were some bricks left. But if it was a wood house, completely gone to the ground, nothing left. And I've never seen sheetrock burned at that temperature. Sheetrock breaks up and actually gets scaly in little tiny pieces, and it curls up, and it looks like, in small pieces, it looks almost like a human skull. So that definitely made our job a lot harder. We went to dive shops, for example, that it was a big warehouse, and this guy had row of boats inside of his warehouse. The boats were completely melted to the slab. All that was left was a cut. You could just look down and you see 4 engines in a row. Even the scuba tank bottles were completely melted. I've never seen aluminum scuba tanks completely melted to the ground.
Clark, can you tell us about, in our conversation on the phone when you came back, about the tour boats that were trying to evacuate people?
Yeah. Another. This happened so quickly that the people who were evacuating, they actually ran right through the town, right through the tourist section, and these people jumped into the Pacific Ocean to try to escape the fire. That's how horrendous this was. So they had, I don't know how many people, but there were multiple people in the ocean, whole families. There were whole families in the ocean, and they have tour boats out there, scuba diving boats and things like that. They actually put those boats into service, and they took those boats, and those boats were coming up and pulling people out of the water. Unfortunately, the embers were flying all the way over, and we had several tour boats caught on fire that were full of rescued people and burned. So then those people had to get off those boats. And if you look out on the horizon, you see these tour boats completely burned up and half sunk in the harbor of Lahaina as well.
I'll say one thing. Some of us know a friend, Shane, who works on Oahu, and he's been an instructor at FDIC hot classes, and he made his way over to Maui, and he had got back to me. We were texting that were 15 Maui firefighters that lost everything other than the shirts on their back, and these members were still showing up to work and running calls.
Every single day, Daryl. Every day they work with us every day. And we worked with a guy that said, I have 9 people staying in my house right now. He didn't live in Lahaina. He was stationed in Lahaina, but he lived on the other side of the island. He said he has family members. His house is full. Every square foot of his house has a family member sleeping in his house because those people lost everything. Like I said, the Hawaiians are such a family-oriented race of people. They took these people in, even strangers. Strangers were taking tourists into their homes. Strangers were taking other strangers into their homes and just letting them sleep in their homes.
I put a link. I don't know another link, but it's just on my personal Facebook page. It's a vetted link that is able to raise money for those members. There's no cut like a GoFundMe or anything to accompany. 100% of that money goes to these members. So it's you could look me up on Facebook, Daryl Liggins, and he put a link there that is raising money for. It just goes directly to those.
Mark, can we see to it that we get that we can get that link up for these brother firefighters in Maui? Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, he answered.
Okay.
You've had quite a run of it, because as soon as you got back, Clark, you went from one natural disaster to another. And I understand that your department had responded to several swift water rescues due to what? 2 inches of water, 2 inches of rain.
Yes, the month of September, we saw 3 inches of rain in the month of September, which is well more than we get in a whole year. And we had the monsoon season, and it's an El Nino year. So we got hammered in one day. We got absolutely hammered, flash flooding, and what Daryl was talking about, living in the desert. All right, we don't have a lot of large trees. We don't have a lot of plants with roots that can absorb this groundwater. So the water lands on the ground and just washes straight into the drainage ditches. And Las Vegas being as hot as it is in the summertime, just debilitating heat, we actually have a very large homeless population that lives underground inside drainage tunnels. And about 350 days a year, they're completely safe and happy down there. It's the few days that we get rain. So one of our assignments is actually when we see a storm coming, we send fire companies down into the drainage ditches and tell these people, you have to leave. You absolutely have to get out of here. Rain is coming, and it's exponential. So all of Las Vegas pitches towards the east, and all the water ends up in the Colorado River, Lake Mead. So if you're on the western side, it rains on the western sides, but as all that water moves to the east, it just keeps getting larger and larger and larger. And on the east side of town, those people, it could be minutes. You could be bone dry, and within 5 minutes you could have 8 inches standing in 8 inches of water. That's how quickly this water moves. So a lot of these people don't heed our warning, or a lot of people are so deep inside these underground drainage areas that we don't get to them. And unfortunately, they get washed completely out. And the east side we try to do what we can. I'm on the south. The east side gets extremely busy because the time they start calling in, person calls in, there's someone in the wash, or someone in the wash, there's a vehicle in the wash. It moves so quickly, we can't even get to them. We start calling 2 areas down. Hey, you're looking for a guy in a red shirt, possibly a man and a woman in a red shirt, all the way down on the east side. Keep an eye out for them. And they eventually end up in a wetlands area. If we don't get to them in time, all the water goes to this wetlands area. It's a natural filter, and the wetlands filter the water before it goes into Lake Mead. So a horrible assignment is to send companies into the wetlands with chainsaws and high boots, and they just start cutting through all the debris and all the trees and things like that, looking for missing people. So that's tough duty as well. Miserable, humid, hot, and there's no reward.
Would you tell us the story about the fellow that came to had to do with a homeless guy that came to knocked on the door or rang the doorbell of your fire station when you were at 11?
Yeah. So Station 11's on Las Vegas Boulevard. Is right by the Welcome to Las Vegas sign. And there's a drainage area that goes right under our apron, and right under the apron of the police station. And then it goes under Las Vegas Boulevard into a open wash. So we knew people were living down there. So one day the doorbell at Station 11 rings, and I answered the door, and there's a homeless guy standing there, and he's holding an iPad. And he says to me, "Did you guys change the Wi-Fi password?" This is a true story. I said, yeah, we changed the Wi-Fi password. He goes, "Oh, can I get that? Can I get the new password?" So yeah, they're and these homeless people. I know we've had a conversation here on this Hump Day about homeless people. They steal generators, they steal fuel. They have lights down there. It is a functioning little village down. They have electronics down there. It's unbelievable how resourceful these people are.
Yeah,
And they know
I opened the door one day, and we ended up having to remove the handle for this spigot because man was taking his morning shower there right at the entrance.
yeah.
Yeah, can't do that. Sorry.
We had an outdoor electrical outlet at one of the fire stations, Daryl, and we actually seal it over because the homeless people would plug in. They'd come and plug their phones in there, and we'd have a line of homeless people waiting on the side of the fire station to charge their phones.
Yeah. I applaud you for dealing with the weather. As soon as I retired in July, I took a road trip with my daughter. We drove down California, went through Death Valley, through Vegas, and through some Utah national parks. I was worried about the heat of Death Valley, but it was nothing compared to Las Vegas. What you guys deal with, it was 118, 119 degrees for a couple of days. Heat, like if anybody's not been there, that is some next level heat. For you to strap on turnout gear and a bottle, and that is worthy of applause.
No one lasts long, Daryl. Even the toughest guys, even the rookies, they don't last long in that.
No, Clark, and I know you've mentioned one of your most dreaded calls is having to go up on a roof of one of these hotels for a rooftop unit that is creating a smell of smoke, and you're up there with some type of what's the name of that roof membrane that you guys use out there? It's white.
Yeah, it's TPO, thermal.
Yeah, that's it. TPO, yeah.
And they have another brand, which was the actual cause of the. We saw the Fountain Blue fire. They had it's called a. I'll think of it. So it's just bright white, and it's a waterproof fibrous membrane. And they put over whatever decking material you have. Usually in Las Vegas, usually a polystyrene, a styrofoam roof decking material. And you just cross the parapet of the roof, and you stand on this roof, and you're in full gear, obviously full gear, air pack, everything. And you stand on this roof. You're looking for one AC unit, like on a Walmart, for example. There'll be 50 large AC units, and they have a smell of burning rubber in the Walmart. So we have to go to every single AC unit on the roof. And it could easily be 125 degrees on that roof in the afternoon. So we work fast. Trying to identify which unit it is. We use a thermal imaging camera. Use your nose. We try to have inside the business, turn all the AC units on, see which one's not running, put your nose in it. You're smelling for either a burned up belt or an electrical smell, electrical odor, put the tick on it. These things are going to be 150 degrees on the roof. You try to find the one that's over 200 degrees, and that's a pretty good indication as well.
Yeah. Jeez.
Unfun to the point that when you pull up and you hear light white smoke in a business with the smell of electrical or smell of rubber, the truck company pulls up, and you just hope someone's really motivated on an engine company that's just going to go throw a ladder on that building and handle that themselves. But the guys on the truck, you can hear a pin drop in the truck and commands. You say, truck 11's on scene. Dead silence. Truck, I'm going to need you to go to the roof and locate this. God damn. Miserable. Worst assignment ever.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to our regulars that aren't here today. Jimmy, I'll be interested to see what kind of job you had, because I do believe you're on duty at Engine 43 today. And Mike Dugan, and he and his lovely wife, Missy, I believe her name is, are returning from a Alaskan cruise that I talked to him yesterday. And Jason Hovelman, a fine gentleman, a busy guy, chief of the Florissant Valley Fire Protection District in America's heartland of Missouri. And Jason, hope you and family are well. In fact, Jason, he may actually be in New Zealand right now because he was following girls lacrosse.
Well, I think it was soccer. Bill, I think it was the World Cup. I think it was a women's World Cup he was following.
Okay, and he was going to New Zealand, I understand, right?
Yeah, it was the cup was in New Zealand and Australia.
So he may be there. So, hey, just a final shout out to our friends at Key. And remember, it's not just a tack line. It's a large diameter supply hose as well. Your hose line is your lifeline. Don't go cheap. And I'm telling you right now, the highest grades at Key are not cheap, but you get what you pay for. Go cheap with other things. Don't go cheap on your hose line. You'll never go wrong with Key. And if you have a problem, they will stick by that product years after you buy it. So let's post those links, Mark, that's the man behind the curtain that you don't, Mark Howell, that you don't see, and who used to play for a rock and roll band, but he's behind the curtain, so you don't see him. So let's post, if we could, the link to the ATF training video on the corrugated stainless steel tubing, and also the link for us to support our brother firefighters that lost everything in Maui. And Chief Lewis, would you give my highest regards to your brother? Who's better looking, Walter? Because you don't look anything like John. You don't look at. Did you guys come from different orphanages? You're muted. You're muted, Walter.
No, it's a milkman, mailman thing, perhaps. But he always used to run the joke of I got my father's hairline, he got my mother's mustache. But I would definitely go with him being more handsome. He's got the seniority on it, and he's always been the consummate great brother. So he's done 10 plus years of service with PSE&G up in Jersey, and 25 years in the fire service up in Metro New Jersey, and retired out of Passaic as a lieutenant. And definitely a mentor of mine, much like
I
some
knew
of the folks in
John
this room.
way before I met you, Walter. And I know you participate in other regularly scheduled fire engineering webcasts. Because I know you're no stranger to fire engineering's webcasts.
No, I'm pretty fortunate. I got to be on the Mike and Mike show. Just recently did one with Steve Shaw out of Fort Lauderdale for the leadership. And I like the dabbling around. I like getting around and seeing friends, and there's friends in each of the groups. So it's a great opportunity for me. So I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. And I love, I wouldn't have an opportunity. Well, I'll see you. Thanks for the invitation to the Orlando Fire Conference. And I will be teaching a class on Florida-specific firefighting. So we'll talk about your wood frame monsters that are more common in Central Florida than they are in South Florida. We use more concrete block than you guys do. And Brent, Chief, is it official?
I'm a supplemental platoon chief. That's my rank now.
Okay.
How do you fit that on a badge?
It's like a hockey jersey.
Supplemental battalion chief. Okay.
Platoon chief. That's higher than a battalion. Or
really?
It goes district chief, and then it goes platoon chief. So you're in charge of 21 stations versus 5 stations.
Okay. Sam, great examination about the smoke and the comments about the green and sustainable. I hope we didn't offend anybody, but if we did, well, that's just the way it is, Clark, God bless you for going over there to Maui, and then having your hands full when you came back. And Daryl, always good to see you. And you took a big long trip with your dad. Those are some of my fondest memories, Daryl, being able to do the same thing. So, hey, everyone there, all of our brothers and sisters that are watching, I'm Bill Gustin, and I'm supposed to be the moderator and the oldest guy in the room. Thank you to Key. Thanks to Clark. Thanks to Daryl. Thanks to Walt, our special guest, and a rather cerebral chap, Samuel, and our friend north of the border from Toronto, Brent. So until next month, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless.